Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so let's just dive right into a really fascinating real-world medical mystery where we're going to actively challenge the standard medical narrative around cholesterol. If you've ever looked at a routine lipid panel and wondered if there's maybe more to the story than just one single highlighted number, you are in the exact right place today. We're going to look closely at a single individual's data that completely disrupts conventional wisdom, and it introduces us to a truly groundbreaking way to look at human metabolism.
Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The statin question. 2. A dramatic lipid transformation. 3. Tracking deep nutritional ketosis. 4. The LMHR phenotype twist. 5. The lipid energy model. And 6. The cholesterol code. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The statin question.
So we absolutely have to ask this foundational question. When a physician is deciding on medical interventions like prescribing statins, should an isolated absolute LDL number dictate the entire treatment plan, especially for a low-carb individual? I mean, for decades, standard practice has often just zoomed in on LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, as the ultimate arbiter of your cardiovascular risk. But what actually happens when you separate that single metric from the rest of a patient's metabolic health context? Well, as we're going to see in our dataset today, treating a number in total isolation might mean missing a brilliant, thriving metabolic engine entirely.
Moving on to Section 2, a dramatic lipid transformation.
Now, this data perfectly illustrates a massive metabolic victory. Just look at the sheer scale of these changes in under 2 months. Total cholesterol dropped 26%, normalizing from 6.16 down to 4.55 millimoles per liter. But the real story? It's all in the breakdown. Triglycerides plummeted an astounding 70%, dropping all the way down to 0.49. And at the exact same time, VLDL, which are the actual particles that carry those triglycerides around, well, they dropped by 69%. So what does this tell us? It proves highly efficient fat oxidation. Basically, the body is clearing fat from the bloodstream at an incredibly rapid rate. It's showing us a metabolic system that is just firing on all cylinders.
And it gets even better, because beyond just the lipids, the underlying health markers show a profound systemic shift. Let's look at HOMA-IR, right? It's a key assessment for insulin resistance, and it dropped by 64%, bringing it down to 0.86. Fasting insulin mirrored that with its own 64% drop. This essentially means insulin resistance completely resolved in just 2 months. Furthermore, hsCRP, which is a major marker for systemic vascular inflammation, dropped 61%. We even see a 28% increase in testosterone alongside a 17% decrease in PSA, which, as the data notes, is perfectly consistent with reduced inflammation. Talk about a complete, holistic physiological upgrade.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the number 032. This is the triglyceride to HDL ratio. By taking the patient's rapidly dropping triglycerides and dividing them by their stable HDL, we get this ratio, which fell by a massive 68%, by the way. In the framework we're exploring today, a 0.32 is literally categorized as an elite metabolic marker. It's a powerful, highly reliable indicator of a very low burden of small, dense LDL particles, which are those specific particles most associated with real cardiovascular risk.
Section 3. Tracking deep nutritional ketosis.
Looking at the breath meter data taken from an app later in April, we can track a dramatic spike. The patient goes from 0, meaning they're not in ketosis at all on April 23rd and 24th, and then shoots rapidly upward into the deepest documented period of nutritional ketosis on record. It culminates at an absolutely staggering 12.66 parts per million of breath acetone on April 30th. To give you some context, anything between 7 to 10 parts per million is already considered moderate to deep ketosis. So hitting 12.66, that is exceptional. It tells us the subject's body is heavily mobilizing and utilizing fat for fuel.
All right, Section 4, the LMHR phenotype twist.
Now, notice the stark contrast here. In low-carb scientific circles, there's a recognized profile called the lean mass hyperresponder, or LMHR. The classic LMHR triad requires LDL to skyrocket to 200 milligrams per deciliter or higher alongside high HDL and low triglycerides. But look at our subjects' actual data. While they certainly have those excellent low triglycerides, their LDL did not spike. In fact, their LDL completely normalized and trended down, dropping 27% from 3.79 to 2.77 millimoles per liter between January and March. It's heading in the exact opposite direction of the classic LMHR pattern. Now, this is considered a highly favorable sign, but it really begs the question, how does all of this connect to their current deep ketosis?
Which brings us to Section 5, the lipid energy model.
So let's talk about the Lipid Energy Model, or LEM. This is a brilliant framework explaining that in lean, metabolically healthy individuals on low-carb diets, LDL actually rises alongside the depth of ketosis. Why? Well, because VLDL and LDL are stepping up to act as necessary fuel transport vehicles. Think of them like a massive fleet of cargo ships mobilized to carry fat energy safely and efficiently all around the body. The Lipid Energy Model elegantly explains that if we were to draw blood and measure this patient right now, during their extreme 12.66 ppm ketosis peak, their LDL might temporarily read a lot higher than their March baseline. But it's doing so simply to transport mobilized fuel. It's a fuel mobilization signal, not a cardiovascular risk signal.
So, circling back to our initial dilemma, the statin question. Let's summarize the complete picture we've just uncovered. We have an elite triglyceride to HDL ratio of 0.32, indicating an insulin-sensitive, large, buoyant LDL phenotype. We have minimal vascular inflammation with an hsCRP of 0.39. The individual is fully insulin-sensitive with a HOMA-IR of 0.86. They have a very low atherogenic burden with VLDL sitting at just 0.23. And crucially, their LDL was naturally trending down in the complete absence of statins. This entire constellation of deeply optimized markers powerfully argues that looking at LDL in isolation to prescribe a statin here would be completely inadequate. It basically ignores the brilliantly functioning, highly efficient metabolic engine running right beneath the surface.
Finally, Section 6, the cholesterol code. To truly understand why this cholesterol context matters so heavily, and to explore Dave Feldman's groundbreaking lipid energy model research further, I highly recommend watching the Cholesterol Code documentary. You can learn more at cholesterolcodemovie.com, and it's actually streaming on Amazon Prime right now. It expands on the exact phenotypes and metabolic fuel patterns we dissected today. Because at the end of the day, you really have to ask yourself a provocative question. When it comes to your health, are you merely trying to treat a single isolated number on a piece of paper, or are you aiming to understand and optimize your actual metabolic health? Think about that and keep exploring.